Good morning and welcome to the Community Review. I'm Josefa Salinas, your host. Thousands of people are being released each week in California from prison, and it's more important than ever for all of us to prepare for them coming home, which means getting the resources that are required to keep them home and in place and ensuring that the barriers are not there. For so long, we've been ignoring this, and that's why the recidivism rate is so great. Joining us today is the executive director of Ronnie's House. It's a nonprofit organization leading the way in Long Beach and around reentry work, and they're now expanding throughout Los Angeles County. She's also the founder of the Long Beach Reentry Collaborative and sits on the policy committee of Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership. Shereen, it is so good to have you here. You're always leading the way in gun violence prevention, recently launching LB United for Peace, a movement that is, working to bring the community together to address gun violence at the root. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Josefa. I'm wonderful. It's so good to be back with you guys.
Oh, it
feels like family.
Well, you are family. You've been on my show over the years now. Geez, at least 10, 15 years strong. You've been for, various things. It seems like whenever there's a great fight, Shereen's right there in it, leading the way for the community. So what drives you to do this work?
I can honestly tell you, my husband, Ronnie Sinegal, who the nonprofit is named after, Ronnie's House, lost his life in 2016 to gun violence. But prior to that, he was a staunch advocate for men and women coming home from prison to ensure that they had the opportunities to stay out of prison and to build better lives for their families because of his past incarceration and what he personally overcame. So I can say love and justice are definitely my fuel for this work.
When you met Ronnie, did you know that he had been in prison?
It's such a great question, which kind of touches my soul. When I met my husband, in the first two lines, he said to me, I served many years in prison. I've overcome those obstacles. I'm a better man. I work in gang prevention. I work with youth. There's just something about you, and I want to get to know you. He led with his story. He didn't try to be anything but the man he was, and I think that's why he had me in an instant, for sure.
When you talk about the fact that he was taken from gun violence, tell us a little bit about that story and what happened so that people can understand. Because when you say gun violence is a broad term, so if you feel comfortable sharing a little bit of the story of what happened to him and how his life was so tragically taken.
Absolutely. We lived in a small area on the lake. We were working, like I said, with gang prevention, reentry work, youth prevention, and we had a couple of businesses. He was an absolute legal genius, my husband. When he was 29 years old, he fought a 3-strikes case while incarcerated, and he learned the law, and it was then that he turned his life around. He got a hung jury. He was facing 45 years to life if he lost that case, representing himself. But it was at that moment he made a decision that his life had value because it was the first time he had fought for it. For years he had surrendered it to making the wrong choices because of his beginnings that led to that and trauma, years and generations of trauma. And so on a Tuesday morning, I kissed my husband goodbye in a small town in San Bernardino, and he went on his morning walk. And about an hour later, I went to check on my husband because something didn't feel right to me. And then I found my husband, and he was just having a conversation with a friend outside of a store. We were a small town, like I said, so everyone knew each other. And I went home, and something in my soul told me to go back, and I did. And my husband was shot on the ground. And the last words that I did hear my husband say was, I can't breathe. The fight was a man-to-man argument about a basketball court in our community, and a fist fight turned into the other party taking it upon himself to take my husband's life. So it is a moment that you never get out of your head. You relive it. It constantly plays in your head to see your husband shot, to see crowds, to try to protect your husband, and the police won't let you near your husband. So I just sat a few feet away from him and just, prayed for him and let him know that I was with him and I love him. And it wasn't until I got to the hospital that they told me that he was taken from me. And from there, what a painful journey. What a painful journey.
Oh, my heart just goes out to you, Shireen. Tell me a little bit about the man who shot your husband.
The young man was a security guard. He had been previously incarcerated himself. And it's not the incarceration or being previously incarcerated that makes you make a decision to take someone's life. It's the trauma that is not healed from that incarceration. After I lost him, I questioned, like, how could someone that knows you, this man that took his life was someone that we all knew in the community. I found out that 51% of people that take each other's lives know each other. And that right there is the basis of why we have to deal with the trauma that is in the communities, that is incarcerating 1 in 3 black men and taking the lives of brown and black communities at alarming numbers. And
My heart is absolutely right there with you, and I can't even imagine that. It has to be something that, I just know the loss of my parents, and those moments you never forget, the moment that they die. And I can only imagine having your husband taken from you, especially with the work the two of you were doing, and you were so excited about it, and he was so excited about it, and so sure of the direction, and to just have it so senselessly taken is one of the reasons, I'm sure, why you stay so passionate about this. So we are here today talking with Shireen from Ronnie's House. She is the executive director of Ronnie's House, a nonprofit organization that is leading the way in the city of Long Beach around reentry work, and is now expanding to the Los Angeles County area. So, Shireen, what are some of the current recidivism rates? And for those of you that don't know what recidivism means, it means the rate of people returning to prison. They get out, they can't find jobs, they can't find the things that they need, and eventually, what do you expect people to do? What they know how to do. They go back to prison. So in California, what does the support look like when somebody's coming home, and what is the current rate of recidivism?
I'll tell you, the statistics show it hovers between 68 and 75% returning back to prison, which is unbelievable. The first 3 years being the most vulnerable, with the first year obviously being the highest rate of return. Domestic violence is up there for one of the key reasons why people are returning back to prison, which is something a local organization shared with me by the name of 10 Toes In, doing great work in Los Angeles. And that makes sense because so many men and women coming home are navigating emotions and relationships, and sometimes there could be pressure in those areas. And again, we go back to mental health. 1 in 3 black men will face incarceration in their lifetime, and the local state population of prisoners is around 117,000, and that doesn't include the federal population in California, which is around 11,000. We've got around 2.3 million people, Josefa, in prisons across the country, and with those on probation, we're hovering around 7 million being sort of under the watchful eye of either, behind bars or being managed by the probation department. It is really alarming numbers that we're seeing.
What does support look like when somebody's coming home? I know you probably talked to lots of people because your organization is so involved with reentry. I used to work in the prison, doing education in the prison with one of the school districts here. So I know that they do some prepping, but there really isn't a whole lot of prep. They kind of just toss you out the door.
Yeah, so I just had 2 individuals we work with in the past 11 months released. One had a 30-year sentence. He was in prison since he was 24, and upon release, he received a prepaid debit card of $200 and absolutely no resources, and a bus ticket if needed, and that's about it. Some of the probation officers right now, which I'm really liking the direction that the Long Beach Probation Department is going. We just started a monthly meeting with all of the reentry partners as well as the probation officers and department so that we could share with the probation officers the resources that are available so that they can share them with the people under them in probation. And so it's taken these types of alignments.
I can only imagine what somebody would feel like after being incarcerated for a period of time and coming out with no resources. But I know that this young man connected with some resources through you. Try, if you can, put it into some layman's terms that the average person might understand about what it might feel like to be in this situation.
So I want you to really think about what that looks like for the average person, never incarcerated, surviving in today's world without, let's say, a college education, or even with a college education for many times are tough. Coming out of prison, most families say they don't have the space for people to stay, so there's no housing, no jobs. And even when you get the job, a lot of apartment buildings are not accepting people with records, or a lot of jobs are only hiring for lower paying jobs for people with records. And so it's definitely set up to keep the prison full and keep the cheap labor in place, which is a billion-dollar industry, the prison labor that's taking place because of all of this inequity and lack of support. Now, there are many organizations doing the work, but not enough. And now with Measure J, there is going to be some significant funding coming down, and so that's progress. I am seeing a shift in how government is thinking, even though we nowhere can catch up quick enough, but I'm seeing both our local government, which we go into, shifting to support reentry. I see Supervisor Janice Hahn, which oversees our area, very much a supporter of reentry, and I'm seeing other political leaders come out to acknowledge that, the system is broken and we have to do something.
Well, I'm glad the politicians are finally realizing that how important it is, because it's our constituents and the people who live in Los Angeles, Ventura County, San Bernardino, the Inland Empire. Everyone is affected. And if you think that it's not your problem, it is, because these people who are coming out of the prison system are coming into all of our communities. Don't you want people to have services? Don't you want people to have the kind of, leg up? Give them, it's a hand up. It's not a hand out. It's a hand up. Get them into school. I know a lot of times they can finish a high school education and sometimes some college when you're in prison. But it's not the same thing as being on a college campus and being around people and reacclimating yourself to being involved in a community. And more so than ever, especially with the pandemic last year, we have found that whether you're in prison or not, mental health has been definitely just stretched to the limit. And that's why, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we've been talking all month with different people about, mental health awareness and different things that people need to do. I mean, imagine in the prison system during the pandemic. I mean, we at least, got to walk outside and maybe stand on your front porch or, wave at a family across the street while, we were down real lockdown. But imagine being in prison, and I don't know how they locked things down, but if COVID was spreading, I'm sure that they kept everybody in their cells. So the same amount of activity wasn't going on, and people were probably scared. They weren't able to get information, and that would take a toll on your mental health. So, I mean, it's imperative that aspect of all of this be dealt with, the reacclimation to society, working through family relations, marital relations, if you were married when you went in, different relationships if you're a father or a mother. Those kinds of things have to be dealt with. And that's why I would just love for you to stick around with us, Shireen, and let's talk more about this in the next segment and talk about the 13th Amendment and last year, the things that we worked on and the things that Ronnie's House has coming up.
That sounds awesome, Joseph. I would love to hang around.
All right, we'll be right back, so don't go anywhere.